There's another one you don't want to hear. Frankly, if you like.
1, 2, 3, set, go.
Hello and welcome to the Power Chord Hour podcast, episode 4, and I am your host, Anthony Merchant. Thank you so much for checking us out. Hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. We're just getting into it, basically. We're just getting started, and I'm having a blast doing it. And I'm very, very excited for tonight's episode because I have played snippets of interviews here on a few of the episodes so far, but this is our very first episode with a guest since starting the podcast, and this is a guy that it's an interview that I've been waiting to do here for a couple months now. Steve Kravac, who you may know as a producer and engineer, very famous one. I would say he is including in the punk community, he has been a producer and engineer now for decades. And some of the most notable bands that he's worked with, he's produced and engineered for blink-182, for Less Than Jake, MXPX, 7 Seconds, Tsunami Bomb, Slick Shoes, Homegrown, Wayne Kramer, and the list goes on and on. He's worked with so many people, and he's basically made all the albums that sounded really good. I didn't really get to mention this in the interview. I kind of forgot to tell him it, but it's very much a compliment that I've always thought of about his producing and his engineering too, really. But what I really like about Steve's stuff is that he cleans up a band. He primarily works with punk bands. What he does is, I feel like he cleans up a band, but without taking away, what makes them them. Like it's basically, he still puts out and helps put out these punk records, but they sound good. And not in the way where they're too polished or slick or overproduced. He has it, you know what I mean? Like he knows how to produce in the right way where he makes a band sound good and he brings out their strong points without overdoing it in the studio, like too many overdubs or too many layers of things, like, just too much of anything. He doesn't do that. He knows how to work with a band, basically really actually play your instruments and make it sound good. I really think that rings true. A good example of that, MXPX, he produced and engineered Life in General and then Slowly Going the Way of the Buffalo. And I think those are the two best sounding MXPX records because it sounds more cleaned up than their really, really early, like Magnifying Plaid stuff, but it's not too polished. I think that's where the band sounds the best. It still sounds like a great punk rock band, but the production sounds good, because there's so many albums that just don't. Less Than Jake would be another one, that he worked with. He engineered Hello Rockview and then produced and engineered Borders and Boundaries, which first of all is the most underrated Less Than Jake record, and it probably is my favorite Less Than Jake record. And I think those are good examples because with Less Than Jake, Pezcore, while I love the songs on that album, it doesn't sound good. You know what I mean? Like the songs are good, but the album doesn't sound great. And it's, it's the production. They didn't have a big budget and, it doesn't, and it kind of shows on there. But it's like, I think what Steve does, like on those records that he worked on, is there's still a loud punk and ska band, but it sounds good, and not overly produced, not too slick. It just, it's like perfect. Like I love his way of production. And he's just a treat to talk to. I was thinking of the first thing that I probably listened to that he worked on, and that'd be Blink-182's Cheshire Cat. He engineered that, and that would have been the first album that I probably ever heard that he worked on, and that would have been like summer 2006 when I was 12, I believe. Yes, I did. I got that album. That was like probably my favorite album that summer, and it's very cool when you look back and it's like, oh, it's so rad. I just had this great conversation with this guy, and it's like, oh yeah, like he's produced all these albums that I love and stuff. It's really, it's funny when you interview a producer because you forget those things. If you talk to someone who's in, say, one band, it's like, you kind of, you still get like, oh my God, it's so-and-so from, that band that you enjoy. But it's like, what's funny is I've interviewed a few producers and you forget all the things that they work on. Like you'll hear, so it's not like, oh, you just hear that one band, you go, oh yeah, I interviewed the guitarist to that. It's like, you'll just hear like songs from so many random band stuff. You go like, Oh yeah, I think that guy. Yeah, like that guy I interviewed. Like, oh, he produced that, or he engineered that, or he's doing the hand claps in that song. You know, like it's just really funny. And I mean, Steve's like that because he's just worked with so many people. I mean, he has an amazing, back catalog of, bands he's producing and engineering. And even right now, like when I was talking to him, and you'll hear it in the interview, but he's currently working with Slick Shoes again. He's worked on a few of their albums, and he's still doing it, still doing great records. I mean, he produced and engineered the very last 7 Seconds record, and that was a really, really good one. I play stuff off that album a lot on the show. And, he just does so much. He is a very busy man, and that's why the interview, I was saying, too, that it's been a few months basically in progress, because the album did come out back in October a few months ago, and we were talking about doing an interview, but he is a busy man. He is an extremely busy man. And we finally got a date and time to work now, and I was really happy we did. I mean, it was an absolute treat, and it's probably, I was thinking about it, this might be the longest interview that I've ever done, which is a good thing, I would say. The longer the better, because that normally means you have things to talk about. And I guess unless there's like minutes and minutes of dead silence, but thankfully there's none of that on here. But this may be the longest interview I've ever done, which is absolutely awesome, and it was honestly one of the most fun ones. This was, like I'm saying, it was an absolute treat to talk to him. It's a guy that I'm a fan of, legitimately. So like talking to him, it's not just me. Obviously, I want to help him promote the new record and stuff, but it's also like, oh, like I just, it's like, I love like all his work, so I'm just genuinely, interested in asking him questions. As you'll hear, my genuine just like curiosity of things, like, oh, was that a P bass on that record that you produced? And just things like that, very specific, funny things that I doubt many people are wondering. Maybe I hope I asked some questions in this. If you have like these burning questions, hopefully I got them answered for you in this interview. And just really, really fun. I can't thank Steve enough. But he did put out the new solo album under Stephen Bradley, and like I said, it is called Summer Bliss and Autumn Tears, out now on his record label, Porterhouse Records. Really, really cool record label, which you should go check out. A bunch of really rad bands that he has signed to it, and he also does really cool vinyl reissues of some classic punk records from bands like All and X and Gun Club, and just a whole bunch of others. Really, really good stuff, so check that out. And get the album right from Porterhouse Records. Go support. When you buy it from him, that's the thing. He produced it, he wrote the songs, he released it on his record label. He got this vinyl pressed. It's like, so go support him. Don't just listen to the songs on Spotify or anything like that. It's like, go buy it from him, because you're getting it right from the source, and the money's going straight to the source. And no guy who deserves it, definitely deserves it more than Steve. Awesome guy, just put out a great record. So right now, here is my interview with Steve Kravac, also known as Stephen Bradley, right here on the Power Chord Hour podcast. Right now on the Power Chord Hour, we're talking to musician and producer Steve Kravac. And Steve recently put out his debut solo record under the name Stephen Bradley, and the record is called Summer Bliss and Autumn Tears, and is out now on Porterhouse Records. And on top of the new music, Steve has had an amazing career as a producer and engineer. He's worked with bands such as MXPX, blink-182, 7 Seconds, Less Than Jake, and the list goes on. So we're going to talk about the new album and a whole lot more. So Steve, how are you tonight?
I'm doing great, Tony. Thanks for having me on the show.
So, I've been really excited to talk to you. Anyone who follows the show, I've played stuff off the new album and talked about it. Definitely my favorite power pop record of 2019. So, to get into it, normally I think people do know you as an engineer and producer. Like, why now did you put out the solo album? Was there anything that made you put it out, like, now?
Well, it's actually something that I had had on my mind for a long time. And what ended up happening was just like a production career got in the middle of got in the way of like making this record. But it's been on the back burner for a long time. And then a few years ago, I had sort of a few fundamental changes in my life, and it opened up some time and some space for me where I could sit down and write and start putting some ideas together, and sort of had an impetus. So I just went with it and focused and sort of like had a writing camp in my house, and stuff started coming out, and it was, some stuff would be like, okay. And then some stuff you'd be like, all right, well, that probably needs a little extra work, or we'll look at it again or rewrite it or what have you. But the stuff that started coming together was encouraging. And that's when I sort of felt, okay, well, this, idea that you've had in your mind, it's doable, and you've got enough ideas to at least get a first record out, And so I just kind of sat my butt down and spent, a couple of months writing the record, writing those songs. And once I had the package sort of together, I was like, okay, well, this kind of tells the story I want to tell. Sort of knew that I was done, and it was time to move on to the next part, which was to record it.
So, I mean, like, going into it, did you have any kind of vision of like the sound? Like, I mean, I think it's a very like power poppy record. I mean, was that the idea, or is that just kind of how the songs came to be? Did that just naturally happen as you wrote?
I think that I think it's both. I think that there were designs about like I knew there was going to be a couple songs that kind of mined that early Elvis Costello thing, Mm-hmm. I knew there was going to be a song or two that people would go, oh, like that might have a Bob Mould kind of ring to it, like I knew that was going to happen. But at the same time, as I started piecing the songs together and writing, the lyrics came first, and then the music, I started piecing the music together afterwards. And as the music started coming together, I would be like, okay, well, yeah, you're going to need something that's kind of like along these lines. You're going to need something that's along these lines. And so I was able to break it up and figure out, okay, well, this is sort of a ballad, this is an upbeat number, this is a mid-tempo number, and was able to kind of take stock of what I had and kind of, I guess, turn that into what ended up being the finished product, which is a fairly balanced record. There's 11 songs. There's about half a dozen of them are mid-tempo, three of them are up-tempo, and a couple of them are ballads. 3 of them are ballads, something like that. So there's a balance to it, and I was definitely conscious of that as I was piecing it together. That there'd be enough energy to carry it through. I didn't want to write one of those records where you sort of get to the second side B, and you're crashing and burning and there's no energy and it's like, oh, get me to the finish line kind of thing, but in the end, I feel like the compositions sit well together. They sequenced well together, and they kind of give an overview of what I was trying to write. I started thinking the other day, like, what would happen if I started working on another record, which I've got a few ideas for some new songs. And I wouldn't see myself diverging to like a completely like different sound or something like that, and I think I would keep it guitar focused and sort of rock and roll focused, which is highly unpopular right now, right? Like I've got the 3 strikes, right? I'm white. I play guitar, and I play rock and roll. So like those are all 3 things that are just not in fashion.
Everything's
right
just against you right now.
Exactly. Well, seriously, but those things aren't in fashion right now. It's just not. There's not, And so you've kind of got to hope. Well, maybe somebody will, hear something and we'll get something in a film or on television or something like that to help break it through. But I will say this, like, people that have been listening to it so far have said that they feel like it's a solid outing. It's a good first record, a good debut, and people have been supportive about the songs and about the lyrics. So that's been really, really positive. You never know how your work is going to be accepted. It's my first record. I've never really done anything like this before. So that, there's some trepidation there, but at the same time, it's like you're going to see it through. You're going to complete the project and complete your idea. And it's been very positive. People have been very supportive.
And, with this record, you have some really like legendary guest musicians on this thing. I mean, you want to talk about some of the people you got to play on Summer Bliss and Autumn Tears?
Yeah, sure. I think that when I went into this, the idea was that I would play the core body of instruments, drums, bass, guitar, acoustic, vocals. I would be the core of the band. And then what I would do is I would bring others in to help sort of augment it. First of all, I didn't want to make a record that was really, samey, and also I wanted it to have the just input and flair from other people that I know and that I trust. So pretty much everybody that I invited to play on the record, somebody that I have a relationship with through music, like we've worked on a record together before, or worked in the studio, or we have some sort of foundation, and so when I moved to LA, one of the first people I met was Wayne Kramer from MC5, and I ended up working on a few of his records out of West Beach Recorders, where I was working as an engineer. And so we stayed in touch over the years, and when it came time to making this record, I thought to myself, I need something, like I need what he does, which is sort of this sort of outside kind of free jazz influenced, electric rock and roll guitar. It's
that's a guy too.
That's a guy too unique.
Who doesn't there's not many other people who sound like him too. Yeah, he's kind of a one in a million kind of guy. So I can see what you mean by that.
Yeah. His phrasing is very different from other people. His tone is very different from other people. Like I was playing it for this guy, a label associate, that guy that's on my label, and I was playing. He was listening to a couple of tracks. He's like, "Who played that guitar? Who was that? Who was that?" And I was like, "That was Wayne." And he was like, "Oh, of course." Like, it sounds completely unique, So I knew that he would be the right person for the songs that I put him on, And it was sort of the same thing for the other guys. Kevin Kane, who has played with the band Grapes of Wrath, who are a longtime Canadian power pop band, were signed to Capitol. He plays with a band called Northern Pikes now in Canada. And he's a real, like, George Harrison understudy, and I knew that George Harrison, sort of that Beatles-y kind of thing, had to be in play somewhere. So I asked Kevin if he would be interested in the songs that I picked for him to play. He played on 2 songs. Those are songs that definitely, lent themselves to 12-string and kind of birdsy and kind of, like Harrison-esque, and to the point where Capitol Hill, one of the singles that he played on, I split the solo in half and had him play like single note guitar in the front half and lap steel in the back half, just sort of like Harrison would have done, and it worked out really good. So those are a couple of folks that played on it. Bobby Adams from 7 Seconds. I got him on one of the ballads called I Will Too. And, a lot of people know Bobby as just like a shredding hardcore guitarist. And he's like probably one of the best guitar players I've ever worked with in the studio. But people don't know that he's like a very versed jazz guitarist. And so I wanted him to play, jazz phrasings over a ballad. I wanted him to do something that nobody has ever heard him really do, like recorded wise, over in a pop song, And so I got him involved. So it was sort of finding folks like that, And then on backing vocals, I knew I wanted sort of like a Beach Boys, like a thick layered thing. So I got Mike Herrera from MXPX and Stephen McDonald from Red Cross involved. And I basically already charted all the parts. They just had to kind of lay their parts down, like follow the guides and lay their parts in. But that stuff came together really, really good. And back in the days when, MXPX was recording and playing as a 3-piece, and Yuri and Tom weren't doing any vocals, like on the Life in General record and on the Slowly Going the Way of the Buffalo record, if we ever needed backing vocals or we ever needed like a second voice, I would do those parts.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So that's actually me that you hear like on those records singing some of the backup parts.
Oh, nice.
Where Mike's not doubling himself, but I always knew that Mike and my voice sounded good together. And so I thought, I'll reach out to him and ask, would he be interested, and he was. And so I was really grateful for that. I'd spent a lot of energy being supportive of the stuff that they've done, so it was really nice to get that energy back, and have him jump in and really throw himself into the work and get stuff dialed so that it sounded great. We didn't use any auto tune on the record. We didn't use, we didn't try to correct anything. It is what it is, those are all the real performances, and so, you surround yourself with folks that you want to have on your team, and are going to knock it out of the park. And I just sort of chose carefully. There's a couple of songs where I ended up just kind of doing stuff myself, out of necessity, and I took on a little bit more on a couple of those songs, but I'm happy the way they turned out. I don't consider myself a great, guitar player, like a lead guitar player, virtuoso guitar player, but these songs don't really need that stuff. These songs need simple, straightforward melodies. They need you to repeat the vocal melody on guitar, that kind of stuff. So it's not really about getting super, super notey, like where it's notey, it's like guys like Wayne are playing notey stuff, like, because they're good at doing that and it sounds good against, the template or the background that I gave them to play against.
And I think that's neat because, I was impressed by the musicians you had on the album, but I really wasn't thinking about it before. It is cool because you really did kind of bring them in a light that a lot of them you really have never heard before. You may not think of like power pop or like, even like you were saying, like kind of that jazzy playing from like someone from 7 Seconds or, from MXPX and stuff. Like I didn't really think of that, but it's neat because really, if you look at the list of guys, a lot of them are playing things that you've never really heard them play before, which, that's really cool,
Yeah, for sure. And like some of that stuff was done with some encouragement, and some of that stuff was like, just let them go and see what they come up with, Angelo Bondini, who's plays on a couple of tracks, is a guy that I met through the LA scene, and he kind of does that Bob Quine, like Richard Lloyd thing, where he gets like outside and kind of plays, like, a little dissonant, and I knew he'd be a great fit. When he came by the studio to drop some stuff down onto tape, I kind of was pointing, oh yeah, that there, stick that there, let's use that there. But at the same time, he was also like throwing out stuff. What about this? What about that? So, the stuff that he came up with on his tracks, like he plays on Calendar Girl and he plays on Summer Bliss and Autumn Tears. Those two tunes, I'm really happy with the stuff that he played on. Like Summer Bliss and Autumn Tears is sort of like a Neil Young and Crazy Horse kind of tune, and he kind of gets to that place that Neil does, it's kind of hurting and kind of bendy and like a lot of single note, like stuff that I like,
And then for I know you have played a few live shows as Stephen Bradley. When you got the live band together, how was that taking? Because like you said, you basically played everything on this album that wasn't played by guests. Was it easy to get the band, to where you wanted them, having other people play your songs, or did that take a little time?
The way I did it was that I spent all the time working with the drummer.
Really?
Yeah, and making sure that he understood all the transitions and all the dynamics, and he's also singing backup, so got him focused on his parts. And so I had about 5 or 6 practices just with myself and drums until I was confident that he knew the songs inside and out, knew the dynamics and transitions and where the fills were. Then we brought in a bass player, brought in a keyboard player, kind of got things like, added those guys after we had a roadmap. But I wouldn't have been able to bring 4 guys into a room or 3 guys into a room and just go, okay, guys, here's the songs, and like, let's play them. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't think I could have, I just wouldn't have been able to pull it off, like not as a band leader, being like sort of a band leader for the first time. Sorry, that's too much pressure.
That's understandable.
Like taking it in little chunks, that helped a lot. And so I ended up having Richard Lloyd play those couple of live shows, San Diego and LA. And really, he had been given the material like a month and a half before we played the show, so he had time to rehearse. And basically, he had one rehearsal with the band at the end of the night, and then we just went ahead and did the 2 shows, the San Diego and the LA show. So I wasn't too concerned about him. He can pretty much free form it, and as long as he knows what key the song is in, he's going to come up with something in the spots where where it'll work out. I got a bunch of video from those shows, and I posted a couple little clips, but I'll post a little bit more over the next couple of months so people can kind of see the band live on stage and jamming with Richard. It was really good, and I'm glad that I did it, and I'm glad that we did proper album launch shows that kind of just kicked the whole thing off the right way. I've tried to do this, like you'd want it to be done, like proper press service, proper radio service, a proper release show, things like that. Just the smaller details that make getting a record off the ground, I think, maybe a little easier to do. But I've been doing this for a long time, so I kind of know what the things are. It's just a question of making the list and then ticking them all off.
That, and I mean, that's pretty cool too. That, I mean, like, speaking of, like, you know, we're talking about the guest musicians on the show or on the album. It's also pretty cool that, I mean, you got Richard Lloyd to play guitar, you know, in your band.
For sure.
That's amazing.
For sure. He was friends of a friend, and I reached out to him and said, you know, I got him on the phone, and I was out on tour with another band doing some tech work, and I was like at a truck stop in like Wyoming or something like that. And so we stopped, and I called him, and I was like, hey, you know, like, I sent you over those songs, you know, did you have a chance to listen to them? He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, well, did you like any of the songs? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, oh, well, that's good. And then he goes, well, I skipped over the bad stuff. So we both just started busting a gut laughing. And working with Richard was great. Like, he basically knew what was expected, didn't know the songs inside and out, but he knew enough to make it work. And it was just nice to have a foil on stage, somebody that could cover those ground on those parts. You know, it's just a lot to sing and play rhythm and come up, you know, some of the lead stuff as well. It's like a lot to do. So
I can imagine. And, you know, I wanted to ask too, you know, like you're saying, this is kind of your first go around with the
right.
band. And I mean, you self-produced the new album. And what I was wondering, like, did you have to kind of find that balance for yourself as producer, and as a musician? You know what I mean? Like, 'cause you've been doing it so long as being kind of the behind the scenes, that it's like, did you have to kind of, you know, balance yourself out and sometimes go, okay, you know, am I thinking too much as a musician, or am I thinking too much as the producer? You know what I mean?
I think the production stuff just sort of is second nature at this point. You know, like, I kind of know, well, you put that mic in front of that thing and that sounds good. And, you know, the arrangement part of it, I kind of worked through already. Like, well, this will happen here, and then this is going to happen here. This is one of the things too, though, like, about it taking so long to pull together, is you got to kind of write all the parts for all the instruments and practice them all and then perform them all. You know, it's not like you send four separate guys away and everybody comes back a couple of weeks later and goes, hey, I got an idea for this, I got an idea for that, you know, and like, it all sort of comes together. You're kind of piecing the whole thing together piecemeal. I trusted that my knowledge of production would get me to the finish line. I just kept going, okay, well, just keep doing what you do, and like, that'll be okay. And then on the other side, the artist side, was like, okay, well, push yourself to write a better part, push yourself to sing that better, push yourself to play a guitar part there that you weren't really comfortable playing, you know, push yourself to I think all the pushing really happened from the artistic side. You know, I think from the production side, like, it was just more of a thing like, oh, well, yeah, okay, we're at that stage of the record where it's time to do this. So yeah, let's do that, you know?
It sounds neat too, because like, what I'm kind of getting from too is, it sounds like musically, like, you almost like picked up and learned a few things, and kind of, it's like making you, you know, like, push yourself more. Like you were saying, like, with guitar parts you might not be comfortable with, and you're kind of pushing yourself to do that, which, I mean, is probably pretty neat. 'Cause yeah, I mean, the production thing, you know, I mean, you do know the production side. You've been doing it now. I mean, you've been a successful producer for so long that it's like, yeah, that part's like second nature. But it sounds like on the musician side, it almost sounds like you're discovering, you know, new things about yourself.
Yeah. Well, for sure. I mean, it's one thing to, you know, ghost sing vocals on other people's records. It's another thing to sit down and like write melodies for 11 of your own songs and teach yourself how to sing them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can imagine.
It's like, whoa, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, I did take a few vocal lessons before I started and followed some stuff online to give myself some guidance. But at the same time, I didn't want to rope things in too much. I feel like people that can sing, they're just sort of naturals. You can either do it or you can't.
Yeah.
You know? And yes, I needed to teach myself for like the finite, you know, part of it, you know, like our mutual friend, Tommy Stinson, right? Like,
yeah,
Tommy's a great singer, you know, but Tommy had to teach himself how to sing, you know. He wasn't the front man of the Replacements. He was the guy that was kind of yelping backup vocals. But when his solo records came out, he had to move front and center. Like, he took it seriously. And like, you see his solo show now, dude, like, he's singing to beat all hell. He sounds great, you know?
One of the best live guys I've ever seen.
Totally. But that didn't happen overnight. He worked at that. He worked to become that singer. You know, he worked to become that front man. You know? So, I got a lot of respect for the guy. You know, I think he's writing better songs than Paul is.
I would say I've always said post replacement stuff. Tommy's put out the best stuff after the replacements easily. I mean, Bash and Pop. I would say Friday Night Is Killing Me, best post match release from any of them, and that last one too was killer. And you
That
did
Chris Mars record though is pretty good too, though.
Chris Mars,
and Hand Grenades.
Oh yeah, that Chris
he did like
Mars
one
stuff.
solo record for Mercury or something like that. It's good, man.
No, that's stuff I play that on the show from time to time. I mean, they all have some good post replacement stuff, but yeah, I think Tommy easily has the best. And what I wanted to talk about too, I mean, you have an amazing studio with Hell's Half Acre. So, I mean, I'm sure you use some great gear on the album, and I'm always kind of interested in this kind of stuff. I mean, some of the guitars and amps that you used on Summer Bliss and Autumn Tears, what were they?
So, like, my core sound for my dirty rhythm, or like my electric rhythm, I was running 2 amps while I was tracking that. So it was like my Telecaster. I've got a 73 Tele, and I run that. I split that into 2 amps. One into a Fender Bassman with a tube screamer in the front of it, and through a 412 cabinet, and then the other side was like sort of like the cleaner tone, and that was a 73 Marshall JMP through a 412 cab. And I'm using like low wattage speakers, like the Bassman's running through like 15 watt speakers, and the JMP's running through 25 watt speakers. So the amps are pushing the speakers, and you can actually kind of hear them breaking up, you know?
Yeah.
So that was like my core sort of dirty guitar sound for, you know, pretty much the whole record. And then bass was I think sort of like one side of I think I used my Marshall. I used the JMP Marshall, and I used a DI. I was kind of doing like a clean, dirty thing on that as well. All my acoustic was just basically like my 60s Southern Jumbo acoustic. And I'm just trying to think of there's a few other things that I used, like the mandolin that I used. Pretty like simple and straightforward, like as far as the gear that I used for, you know, just my standard drum kit, like tuned standard, bass, not too much frilly stuff, just a P bass, like that's sort of the sound of rock, you know, a precision,
the standard
precision bass, sort of using like the Marshall to kind of fake an Ampeg SVT. It's kind of hard to fake, but you can do it if you get close enough. That was sort of like the core of the gear that I was using. And then, you know, other people were working in their studios, or set up different rigs for people if they'd come up, just so that everybody would sort of have their own tones. And I did do some keyboard stuff myself. I have like a studio package, it's the IK Multimedia studio package. Got like 19,000 sounds in it or something like that.
Jeez.
So I used that for like some percussion stuff and tubular bells and some Wurlitzer piano, stuff like that, you know, where I needed like just like little toy noises or hand toy stuff. Like, and there's a lot of percussion in there too. Like I use tambourine, I use hand claps, I use shakers, I use kibasas, I use, you know, all those hand toys really help sort of move things along. If you listen to like Exile on Main Street, like half the arrangement ideas on that record happen with percussion, not with guitars or keyboards or bass, you know?
See, that's the producer side of you. That's where you know those great secrets, where I think it really comes in handy with making a record like this, where you kind of know, you know, those little things where people don't think about it, where they go, but that's the production side. That's what makes those albums sound so good. You know, it's not the stuff that's front and center.
It helps keep them fresh to the ear too, knowing when it's time to change up. Like, okay, well, you know, you've got to do this here and do that there, but oh yeah, something's got to happen right here, you know, like just knowing that is half the battle, because then you can quickly go, oh, we need to dial in a tone that's going to fit this part. Oh, we need to come up with something for that, you know, and if you're sort of good at it, you can keep things moving along and get a lot of that accomplished without getting bogged down, you Like I'm producing a record now for this Tooth and Nail band, Slick Shoes, who I worked with in the 90s.
Oh, nice. Great band.
And it's very, very like technical, like pretty like upbeat, like what we call, pop punk, I guess, but it's like it's almost like making a Pantera record right now, like working with these guys. Literally, it's like that. It's that technical.
Really?
Their playing level is that technical, and you're trying to do stuff and pull off that kind of stuff. But at the same time, you're trying to get different tones for different songs and different tones, within different songs. So here, plug this guitar in. Okay, let's do this part with that guitar. Oh, let's try this here. Oh, let's stripe acoustic against that. And if you're keeping moving along and keeping the ideas flowing, it keeps the guys energized, keeps things focused, and like you can get a lot done. This is actually a really fun record that I'm working on with them right now. We just kind of got the kibosh today because the power went out. So,
that's never good.
No, it's not good. So we had to finish work early.
Oh, that's a bummer.
But yeah, the studio, Hell's Half Acre still going strong. I bring a few bands through there every year. Was doing some stuff last year with Modern English, the
nice
80s post-punk band. I cut a couple of new songs with them. Working on this new Slick Shoes thing. That last 7 Seconds record was done up at my place. There's always something going on there, and I'm starting to use it more and more, like for my own production. As I'm going to continue to do more writing, I'll be using it for that as well. So the studio is still like a going concern.
I mean, like, I guess I didn't think about it before, but like, do you ever have to change up your mindset? Like, is it ever hard? Like you were just talking about, like, you kind of like with the Stephen Bradley record, you're kind of doing it like stripped down and trying to keep it as simple as can be. And then when you go in something else, like the new Slick Shoes record, you said, it's kind of a different dynamic. Like, is that ever difficult? Like, do you ever have to get yourself in a different mindset? Like you said, like if you're going from kind of making like a power pop record to doing something where it's like, okay, this is heavier. We're using different stuff. Like, do you ever have to change your mindset, or is it just kind of like you're used to that now? Just every band is different.
I think I'm for the most part kind of used to it now. I think it's more a situation where you're just kind of attuned to what the client needs. And by that, I'm saying, what they need as far as like tones, what they need as far as support, what they need as far as arrangement help. Like there's lots of levels where you can add your 2 cents, I think that it is sort of second nature as far as, okay, well, yeah, we need to knock the drums out. Okay, yeah, we need to, work on these guitar parts now. Like there's a process and there's a flow chart, if you will, to getting the record done. So that is sort of written in stone, but you're definitely thinking as you're coming into like working on like a Slick Shoes record, you're like, okay, well, yeah, we're not doing those cleaner open guitar tones like we'd do on the Stephen Bradley record. We're doing like heavier, crunchy, modern, tones. And so, yeah, you're changing your mindset as far as what you're looking for, like what you're trying to get out of it, but the path and how to get there, and what stuff to sort of plug in to get you there pretty quick. And so if you're doing that and keeping things moving along, you're probably doing a good job.
Now, I also want to talk about, I mean, you are a very busy man. I mean, you have the Stephen Bradley record. I mean, you're a producer. You have Hell's Half Acre, and you also have Porterhouse Records, which the new record is on. And I mean, yeah, you release new music, and you've put out some really cool like punk vinyl reissues. I mean, how did the label get started? When did you start doing Porterhouse?
I started doing it like in the late 90s. So it's been around like 20 years.
Oh, really? I did not realize that.
Yeah, sort of in various incarnations. And like it was always sort of in the early days, it was just sort of trying to figure out how to be a record label, like I'd always wanted my own imprint. Like I wanted the option to put out stuff on my own if I wanted to. But then like a lot of structure had to be built around that, like a distribution system, and public relations and like all this other stuff that has to happen, So that label was around a lot. It's been around for a long time, and it's kind of gone in fits and starts until I really started. In 2012 or so, I kind of took it over myself. There was a partner involved, and that partner left, and I started basically just doing my thing with it. And that's when I kind of started building more confidence with it, and was like, yeah, there's options here. There's cool stuff to do. And yeah, what keeps the lights on is licensing stuff and putting it out on vinyl, like some of that classic punk rock stuff that I do. And I'm always searching for new stuff, you know. There have been a few baby bands that I've done over the years. There's a couple that were involved when the label first gets started. Those bands are like have moved on to other things or whatever. The stuff that I have, like really like the core right now, is myself with the Stephen Bradley record, Chip Kinman from the Dills and Rank and File. I have his project Ford Maddox Ford, which is sort of like a glammed blues kind of project. They're doing some new music, and we're doing putting out a live record from them this spring. And then another real active artist that I just signed is a guy named Art Bergman, and he's a Canadian Juno winner. He was involved in the indie scene from like the late 70s on through the 90s. Was signed to the majors in Canada, won a Juno, and I've just done a deal to pick up a bunch of back catalog from him and do some new releases with him. So I'm super excited about that. I've followed his career all my life, and he's sort of like some folks would kind of call him like a Canadian Paul Westerberg. He's more like a Paul Westerberg meets Leonard Cohen kind of thing. He's kind of dark.
Nice.
Yeah, so he's an excellent songwriter. We're going to do some stuff for him this year, release some new stuff, release some old stuff. So yeah, the label's in a good place right now. There's been some good reissues. It's been able to support getting my record out. It's been able to support Chip. We do most of the work in-house, like as far as publicity work, PR stuff, mail outs, everything pretty much. It's like a self-contained unit, you know? And I've sort of learned over the years how to do that cost effectively. And it's fun to do. Like it is fun to take on a record and figure out how are we going to market this? Or, you know, like Chip comes along, well, I want to do this. How do we get that done? Well, what about this or what about that? Like you can always make up sort of your path or your way to do things. And it's always a challenge. You know, when I first got to LA and I was working at West Beach, I was talking with Brett Gurewitz, and I asked Brett, oh, well, what do you find more exciting, like, you know, playing in your band or running the label? And he's like, actually, I like them equally, you know? And I was like, yeah, I understand that. I get that. So maybe in a way he and I are cut from the same cloth in that respect.
That's awesome. And it's good to hear that it's going strong, it sounds like, and you have some great future endeavors with it.
Yeah, definitely. There's good stuff happening for it this year. It's going to be one of our bigger years, so that's going to be good.
Oh, it's awesome. And I wanted to talk about, I mean, your producing career as well. I mean, as it's went with whether the label or putting, you know, the new Stephen Bradley record out, it sounds like it's a lot of like you just jump in and learn. Now, is that like how you started producing as well? Did you just jump into it? Like,
yeah, in a way. Like there weren't really schools that you could go to back then, you know? So you're sort of learning tricks of the trade. And I was doing a lot of live stuff when I was a youngster. And so that kind of helped me figure out how things worked, you know, and I was able to apply some of that stuff in the studio. But I also had sort of a mentor that kind of helped me, you know, learn the ropes in the studio. But the first studio that I ever like kind of really worked out of a lot was one that I built myself, like a 16-track studio that I built myself.
Oh, nice.
And so, yeah, when you're doing it sort of at that level, you kind of learn like what works and what doesn't work. And yeah, you learn pretty quick.
It's a lot of like trial and error.
Yeah, there's a lot of trial and error for sure. Now it's at the point where, like, if people come to work with me, like, you know, they want a good bass sound together, and they want it together in an hour or two. You've got to keep things moving along, you know. But yeah, it's a learning curve, and every day's a school day. I'm still picking up stuff like day in and day out.
That, you know, though, do you feel like that's a good thing? Like, I feel like this far in that you're still learning things, I feel like it's much better than being like stuck in your ways or, you know, like going the other way.
Oh, for sure. And that's the part about music that you can be eternally grateful for, because you're never going to know it all. You're never going to learn it all. You're never going to be able to, you know, understand it all. It presents such a huge a challenge to educate oneself about, that no one can hope to expect to, take it all in within a lifetime. That's for sure. And that definitely is part of one of those things that keeps you going and keeps you coming back,
Yeah. The very first album I think I ever heard that you worked on, it would have been Blink-182's Cheshire Cat, and I know you engineered that. And what I've always heard about is that the band had a really crazy small budget. It was like recorded really quick. Like, do you remember that being a stressful recording at all?
Yeah, it was really tough because the label had just basically said, "Well, go to West Beach and record and mix the whole thing in a weekend."
Oh wow!
And it was like there was 17 songs.
That is a long album. That really is. It's not a short record.
All the songs were 2 minutes long, right?
Uh-huh.
But like just to try and do 17 songs in a weekend and and they didn't have really much in the way of gear, like so, and I couldn't get anybody on the phone in San Diego to go, let's rent a guitar amp, or let's it had such potential, so we captured what we could, the best we can, sent it back to them. And obviously they're like, oh, well, we need to do more work on this. Well, yeah, you do, because you can't do a 17 song record in 3 days. So they ended up having to track some more stuff down in San Diego and got it mixed together and got it out. And it was kind of funny because I didn't hear anything more about that record, And then one day I was driving down Melrose and I could hear one of the songs blaring out of this car next to us. And I was like, oh my God, like that's that band. That's that song from that band. And at this point, the record had started taking off and it already sold like 100,000 copies or something like that.
Wow.
Like wow. It was like, holy mackerel. So yeah, it was just ridiculous.
Like was that?
But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say, I mean, was that pretty normal back then, getting these punk bands or labels are just kind of like unimaginable things like, here, make this work in 2 days. Like here's next to no money. We don't really have the best gear, but just make this work.
Yeah, I mean, you'd get some of that, but you'd get it from both sides. You'd get some bands that would come in and they'd be all prepared, have good gear, and they'd have a budget, and then you'd also be working with folks that were just sort of well, we're just trying to haphazardly throw this together and we'll see what happens. So it was a little bit of both. Like when you worked at West Beach, you didn't really know, when a new client would show up, you'd open up the door for them. You never really know how the day was going to go. There were some days, man, where you just be like, oh, I just want to go back to the house and maybe not be here right now. But a lot of good stuff came out of that room at that era, and it was a great place to work, great place to learn. And it really was a super springboard for me as far as starting my production career in the States. I'd been working in Canada doing some stuff up there, but not a lot of people knew about those records.
And I mean, on the other end of production and budgets and all that, you also worked with MXPX on their major label debut, Slowly Going the Way of the Buffalo. Did you feel like there was added pressure? Because I've heard interviews with the guys from MXPX where there was they felt pressured because it was their major label debut. As a producer, did you feel that as well? Because you were with them before that, working on Life in General. Was there a difference in okay, there's added pressure on this now. There's, you probably had a bigger budget. It's going to a major.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And I mean, I think that's natural, I think Mike was asking himself to write better songs. I think I was asking myself to make better records. I know Yuri and Tom were asking themselves to perform at a higher level. I think everybody was trying to definitely step it up, and I'm sure that I'm sure that we were feeling it. I know we put in a lot of hours to try and make sure that we cover all the bases and done the best job that we possibly could. But yeah, I would say that was a real thing, that we were really trying to take it to the next level. I'm sure that we were all kind of feeling it a little bit.
And
it's funny though, because I go back and I listen to those two records, and Life in General just seems a little looser and more it's a little trashier sounding or whatever, but Slowly Going the Way of the Buffalo has definitely got more shape to it, more girth. It sounds a little bigger. They're two different animals, from the same producer and the same band, but they're pretty much two different records.
Now, I got to ask, I mean, whose idea was it on there? I do notice, because Mike normally plays a Stingray, and on Buffalo, if I'm not mistaken, it sounds like he's playing a P bass. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, no, he plays a P bass on that.
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty much a P bass guy. Like we're working on this Slick Shoes thing right now. There's like three Ernie Ball Stingrays sitting in the corner on stands, and we're using a P bass. But the tone, you can't beat the tone. You just can't. Yeah, we used a P bass for that record, and I think we might have used. I can't remember on Life in General whether we might have used the Music Man, but I want to say that we used a P bass. But yeah, I think like after that, Mike was using P basses, Music Man's pretty much exclusively after that, and I know he's sponsored by Ernie Ball. So
yeah, I was just wondering that because I always associate Stingrays with him, but on slowly going the way of the Buffalo, I went, yeah, that doesn't sound as punchy as a Stingray. I was like, okay, I thought that was a P bass, so I'm happy to know I was right.
Yes, you were. You were absolutely correct.
And this is kind of a funny question because you obviously just self-produced your new record, but I mean, you are a producer, so I feel like this is different. But do you feel like now, bands, the accessibility to record yourself and self-producing, obviously that's become, a much bigger thing. It's more accessible to do now. But do you feel like there's something lost, you know what I mean, in people doing that where like it's accessible to everyone, but it doesn't mean that you're just automatically, a producer per se, like do you feel like that takes away quality?
For sure. I had a client I was working with last year, and he had tracked a bunch of stuff with a couple of engineers. They didn't really know what they were doing, and there was a bunch of mistakes made, and it was stuff that you couldn't really go back and correct. And here's this guy with this record, and we're trying to do the best we can with what we've got and mix it. But it fell up short in a couple spots because there were some technical limitations because folks didn't really understand what they were doing. And so there is something to be said for, working with professionals that know how to make records.
It helps, you're saying?
Yeah, that's it, yeah. But I mean, we're in the era where everybody's got a laptop and everybody's a record producer, and everybody's got a laptop, so everybody's a film editor, or a film director. It's great that we have the flexibility to record whenever we want to. Like this friend of mine from New York, she's just working on a new project of her own, and she posted the other day, she's like, I'm recording myself for the first time, and using the stuff I have, and I'm just going to do it and not, use some dude, do all this work myself and then end up giving it to some dude, And so I wrote, yeah, right on, good. That's what all this stuff is for. It is to work with and experiment with and learn from. And it's a lot of trial and error. And, we all make mistakes, and we got to ask questions or ask friends, like when Pro Tools came out, Pro Tools was sort of a black art, nobody really knew what held it together. So there'd be lots of questions well, how do you get the SCSIs to talk to the Mac? It doesn't work for me, or my SCSIs won't boot up right or something. It was always something, and you'd be calling. There was no internet, right? So you'd be calling people, dude, what did you do? I don't know, call this guy. I think he knows, that's what it was, trying to learn that learning curve, coming out of analog and into digital. And sort of even more has been lost because people don't really know the analog techniques that were founded before digital techniques. So some people are just kind of going blind on it, obviously at some point, none of that analog stuff will exist anymore.
That's a sad thought.
Yeah. We'll be a digitally based, society, completely digitally based society. I mean,
because there's something to say, we were talking earlier about the new album and some of those little subtle things that you added in there, where it's those are things that I don't think the average person thinks of. Like, those are techniques, and that is a skill that, you know, you being able to record yourself doesn't mean that you go, hey, you know, you layer this way, or if I throw this on here, it manipulates the sound of this. Like, you know, I feel like that's kind of lost now. You know, a lot of times.
Yeah, and I think, you know, folks that are working on their own will have to figure that out for themselves, you know. Like, mixing is a big part of that. Tracking is one thing, mixing is a whole other thing. Like, when I moved down from Canada to California, I had figured out how to track things and get good sounds, but I still wasn't a very good mixer. And pretty quickly I realized, oh, you've got to like work on these techniques, and you've got to work on this and this, like, to kind of get it together. And so because I had experience, I was able to take the information I was getting, sort of refocus, regroup, and move forward, you know. That's one thing too, when you're trying to do it at a commercial level, and you're working in the, you know, as an engineer in a commercial studio. It's another thing when you're like hacking around in your bedroom as a novice or as a part-timer, like making a record because you feel like doing that right now, you know. Like, those are sort of different. They're different approaches, I guess.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, that totally makes sense. Sadly, I don't know that everybody realizes that, but I think that's absolutely true.
I mean, I think that there's still, like, as people are doing a lot of tracking on their own, I still think there's places for, you know, skilled producers and engineers to work within that, as far as like doing mixing stuff, or, you know, getting basic bed tracks done, like, you know, drums and stuff like that, where you're talking about a lot of inputs and phasing, and where you can end up causing yourself big problems if you don't do things right out of the gate, you know. So, you know, some projects that I'll work on, people will just bring it to me and go, could you mix this? Or I'll start off a project, oh, we just need some drums, can you do that? And then they'll go to their house and work off their computers or stuff like that, you know, maybe bring it back for mix. It just depends on the client. Everybody's different.
And, you know, I wanted to ask you right now, as someone who just put out a record, how do you feel about like distribution right now? It seems like a very, like, how music gets out there and everything, just, it seems it's not as cut and dry as it once was. Like, is it hard to navigate now how you put music out? Like, it's just not as simple, it seems.
I don't know about that. I mean, I think that the avenues that we have for distribution are pretty much the same. We have retail, you know, we have digital, you know, like iTunes, and we have streaming. Streaming, yeah, okay, that's new, but even if you look at that, it's been around for what, like 5 or 6 years now?
Yeah, I guess it's not as new, yeah.
And so I think that, like, iTunes was a big leveler of the playing field. If you couldn't get your record into stores, you could get it up on iTunes and people could find the record somehow. So that kind of changed things a lot, and it kind of made it a little bit more egalitarian. And when streaming came along and iTunes kind of took a backseat to streaming, well, then you're like in another situation. Folks are getting the music, but you're not getting compensated for it like the way you would if you were selling records or selling downloads. And that's super problematic. Like, I've looked at the distribution numbers. I've looked at the numbers that come back from my own artists on my labels from streaming, and it's not good.
No.
And so I think it's more, in this day and age, it's more about, as like from, say, a label owner's point of view, it's important for me to leverage. It's important for me to leverage all the different aspects of distribution. Like, I got to deal with the small mom and pops stores, like going in, taking them play copies, putting up posters for the artists, like in those stores. That's one proactive thing you can do, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, from a streaming standpoint, you can work on getting songs, you know, added to other people's playlists or stuff like that. So I was saying, like, as far as like on the Spotify kind of thing, like the revenue is just not there, right? So you've got to kind of find ways to leverage that, you know? For instance, like on my new thing, the Stephen Bradley record, I only put the 3 singles up on Spotify: the ballad single, the rock single, and the pop single. And I'm not putting the whole record up on Spotify. I'm hoping that if people hear it on Spotify, they'll come over to the website and check it out and maybe buy a copy.
You know, I like that idea. I wonder if more people kind of go that way, because you never hear musicians, and rightfully so, no one's really satisfied with Spotify and the way it's running. So I kind of like your idea of here's a couple songs, and then it's like, come to the label where it's like that you're releasing it, like come straight to, the source, like where the artists are going to be compensated, much more fairly than, because really, I've never heard a musician who's happy with the way Spotify works. No one but Spotify is happy with the way that Spotify works, it seems.
Yeah, for sure. And it's sort of the model we're stuck with right now. So we're going to have to deal with that. One of the ways is, doing vinyl, selling vinyl ourselves, doing small DIY stuff. Like that's how I think artists can help themselves, using the YouTube, leveraging the YouTube, like I'm doing videos for all the songs on my record, because I feel that that's I can launch those videos through publications. I can get Twitter followers to find out about the record if I keep putting out videos, But there's only so many publications that are going to write about you. There's only so many relevant publications. It's half distribution, it's half marketing, really. And the way that you work those two things together.
Very nice. So, as we're kind of wrapping up here, you just put out the new Stephen Bradley record. What else are you working on right now? What else can people expect from you this year?
Basically, like the next few months is going to be focused on continuing to push the Stephen Bradley record, like getting that out, doing more videos, doing more podcasts, talking to people about it, doing interviews wherever I can. I'd like to do some more live shows, to keep it going on that respect as well. I've been trying to connect with some of the musicians I was working with in the fall on that to see if we can get something going. And then continuing to start writing new stuff myself, should hopefully form a new record sometime in the future, maybe another year down the road, a year and a half down the road. But I've got enough to do on this record right now to support it, as far as pressing videos and stuff like that to keep me busy through most of the year. Another little pet project that I'm working on is like some older stuff from one of my old Montreal bands, a band that I played in called Los Patos, which means the ducks.
Oh, nice.
And that's features a guy named Alex Soria, who used to have a band called The Nils, who some people might remember from the old days. But if you don't know The Nils, Tony, you need to check out The Nils.
I'll have to listen to them. I've heard the name. I've never heard them though.
So you would like that stuff. It would definitely be up your alley. So working on some old tracks from that I'm resurrecting, working on some new writing, working on the label, just keeping busy, man.
It's you do. You stay busy with your stuff. You're always doing something, which is a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. But I can't do anything else. I can't see it any other way,
And this is kind of going into the future a little bit, but when you do eventually get to the second Stephen Bradley record, do you feel like you're going to kind of do it the same way, like kind of write the bulk of it, or basically all of it yourself, and then kind of have guests come in and kind of add their flair to it? But do you feel like going on, you are Stephen Bradley, you are you basically are the one man band.
Yeah, I think it's the way to do it at this point. It's hard to bring on other people because you've got to compensate them. Where does that stream of revenue come from? The other thing too is when you're kind of piecing it all together yourself, you can basically arrange things the way you hear them, the way you want to hear them. And that was the kind of cool thing. The way that I did it was when it came time to show the other guys their parts. Well, your parts are already defined for you. Here they are. You're playing this stuff here. Hey, you dude, you're playing this stuff here. You're playing this stuff here. So at least that way it's taken out of the equation. You don't have to walk everybody through everything. It's just like, there's the parts, learn them, and we'll see you at band practice.
No, that makes sense. That seems like, that would push things along a lot more than you have to hope the other three people are doing their part and kind of, picking up their slack. But
yeah. What you're trying to do is you're trying to lay out a roadmap for them so that to help them be successful.
And it seems, to your credit as well, I feel like you have to be at a certain place as a musician and as a producer as well to be able to do that. To go, this is the vision I have in my head, and you can get it out there with other people. You know, you can go, hey man, this is what I want it to sound like. This is what it is. And to be able to do that is, you know, that's a talent in itself, because that's not, I feel like you have to be musically comfortable and everything to be able to do that and kind of get those visions.
No, for sure. Yeah, for sure. And like when you're dealing with not only in the studio, but dealing with a band live and putting together a band live and walking them through the stuff, like there's an approach to that and how you're going to deal with those folks and how you're going to deal with, you know, not everything's going to work out right. It's not going to sound exactly the way you want it to. Like, you've got to control your own expectations as well, right? And you've got to pick your battles. Okay, that's worth discussing. That other part, that's not worth discussing. You know, like that's stuff that you kind of learn. I think there's some people that can be that have those smarts and have done it, like, you know, at an earlier age. But I'm glad that I did this stuff a little bit later, when I was a little bit more mature, a little bit more measured, a better communicator, and had a little bit more patience. I think it's made things less stressful, and it's been more fun to do. And a big part of doing the whole Stephen Bradley thing was I wanted to have some fun.
Well, I mean, I like what came out of it. I think we got a great record. And where can people find you? Where can people get the Stephen Bradley record? I mean, like I said.
So if people want to pick up the record, the LP comes with the vinyl LP comes with a download code. So if you want to order that, you can go to porterhouserecords.com and just click through the record store. You'll see it there. And a couple of clicks and it gets mailed to your house. It's available on iTunes. The singles are streaming on Spotify. So the product's around. It's at the usual suspects. And it is with national distributors. So if you're somewhere in America and you shop at a mom and pop shop, your local record shop, you can ask them to bring in a copy for you and they'll get it in for you.
I like that. That's, you know, you can still go in and get a physical good. I like that.
Absolutely.
You know, like you were saying, some of the analog's going away. So, I mean,
that's it, man.
You
know. I still want to be able to drive out and get my hamburger.
Yeah, exactly. You know, not everything should be digital, but,
absolutely.
You know, so it's been great talking to you on here. We're going to obviously play some Stephen Bradley now, and we're going to open it with probably my favorite song off the album. And I credit that jangly guitar. You got it just so well, and I don't feel like everyone gets that tone down. We're gonna play Preemptive Strike right now, right here on the Power Chord Hour.
Woo-hoo.
Right here on the Power Chord Hour podcast. That was a nice little block of Stephen Bradley for you off his debut solo album, Summer Bliss and Autumn Tears. That was Calendar Girl. Before that was Loose Ends. Before that was Love Tumbles Into Obsession, the opener off the record, and opening up that block of music was Preemptive Strike, and all of those are off Stephen Bradley's new record. You got to go check that out, and I hope you enjoyed the interview as much as I enjoyed doing it. That was so much fun talking to Steve. I've talked to him online for probably almost a decade, if not a decade at this point. I mean, I guess it would probably have to be, because I remember asking him production questions when I was in high school. So yeah, I've probably been talking to him on just social media and stuff probably since 2010, and he's always been a really, really good dude. And it was awesome to finally talk to him on the phone, and it was just such a blast. We got to have him on again. I mean, that interview could have went on for another 3 hours, honestly. I mean, I was just scratching the surface. There's so much, more about his production career, stories about albums that he's worked on. I mean, just more about his musical path. His upcoming plans. Just even more on the new record. More on Porterhouse Records, Hell's Half Acre, everything we talked about in there, we could have talked about even more, I think. And, we probably will at some point. I'm sure we'll have him back on. And, hopefully too, when he has his next, Stephen Bradley record. I can't wait. I know this one just came out, but, when the second one comes out, I'm going to be just as stoked, because I really, really like this one. If you heard podcast 2, where I was talking about my top 10 favorite records of 2019. That is on there, so I talk all about why I like that record so much. And you can probably hear my enthusiasm in this interview. I really do like that album, and I like kind of hearing about the nuts and bolts of it, and kind of what goes into recording. I always think that stuff's interesting, and hopefully you do as well. I try to keep it to a minimum. I know, Gear Talk, whenever I talk to people, I like to know what they use when they record, and I try to keep that within a few kind of within a couple minutes, because it's like I realize like some people are into that, and then other people are like, I don't know what the hell, a dual rectifier is, nor do I care. So, I don't know that everyone cares about gear talk, but I do. I love that stuff, and I hope you do as well. And if you're not following us on social media, I would love if you did. And also go follow Steve Kravac, and he is on all, basically, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and you can find him under Stephen Bradley. And I mean, go check him out, stevekravac.com. He is also hellshalfacre.com, porterhouserecords.com, has a couple websites go check out. And like he said, you can buy the record from porterhouserecords.com. And so yeah, once you do all that, also go give us a follow. We're on social media at Power Chord Radio on YouTube. You might be even listening there right now. So it's funny to say that. I'm used to saying that on the radio show, and I forget on here that you may very well be listening to this on YouTube. So probably don't have to plug the YouTube page. Well, if you're there, go hit that subscribe button while you're listening to me right now. And I beg of you, hit that subscribe button under here. And but yeah, we're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We're on Spotify. We're on SoundCloud. You can email me, powerchordhour@gmail.com. I have some Power Chord Hour t-shirts and guitar picks, totally free. Just hit me up and I'll send them to you. And yeah, I mean, thank you so much for listening to this. I really do hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, give us a follow, and give Steve a follow. Buy his new record, is really, really good. And I mean, if for whatever reason you've never heard some of the records that we were talking about that he's produced and engineered, go check them out. I mean, blink-182, MXPX, Less Than Jake, Tsunami Bomb. I'm sure you've heard all these bands, but if you somehow missed some of these records, and go look through your record collection, I bet you're going to go look through liner notes and go, damn, that guy I just listened to, he produced this record, he engineered this record, like he knows what he's doing. He is a bona fide musician, bona fide producer, engineer, all that good stuff. And it was such a blast talking to him. I'm so happy this finally got to happen. I've wanted to talk to him for a long time, even before the album came out. Just as a fan, and it's kind of like, I like to have something. I like people to be able to promote something, if you're going to have them on. So, it was great when the new album came out, because it's like, this record is not only good, it's like, I want to talk to this guy anyways, but it's like, he just put out a good record, so it's going to be easy to talk about it. It's not like a thing where it's like, well, I really like, this, I like his production, but it's like I'm not a fan of the record, and it's like it's totally not like that, where it's like, oh, well, you have to bite your tongue because you want to talk about this. It's like, no, it's nice and easy, because I'm genuinely, I love this record that he just put out, and I also love all the records he's worked on. So really a no-brainer to have him on. Total blast to talk to him. So I hope you loved it as much as I loved talking to him, and that is going to be it. Check back for the next Power Chord Hour podcast, should be very, very soon. And if you need your other fix of the Power Chord Hour, we do have the weekly radio show, totally different from this. I spin you a bunch of music, still talk to you, but I play you tons and tons of music on that. I probably fit I play lots of punk and alternative, lots of fun, short, fast, and sweet songs. So, in an hour, I get to talk to you a bit, get to give me music news and all that good stuff. And I also play like 14 or 15 songs. So we cram a lot in there in an hour, and commercial free as well. So no commercials. You tune in and listen to that. You get me for the whole hour. And that is on 107.9 WRFA in Jamestown, New York. But you can also listen to that on the station's website at WRFALP.com. And also on the 107.9 WRFA iPhone app. You can go download that in the App Store, stream the station there. Listen to me with the Power Chord Hour Friday nights at 10 Eastern on there. And also just listen. Not Power Chord Hour. WRFA is a really, really rad radio station. We play so much cool stuff on there, and well worth checking out, not just my show. So also check that out, and yeah, check back here for the next Power Chord Hour podcast. But until that podcast, I'm Anthony Merchant. Thank you very much for checking out the show.